Well, it's such a pleasure to be here, and I just have so many wishes of thanks to so many people, and also to so many wonderful people, including many wonderful women at this conference. I know I'm sort of the token woman at the moment, but I can tell you there are many wonderful women, including, of course, Viviana. Thank you to her energy at Brain Circle, for example, putting such an amazing summit together. And of course, all the organizers of Longevity Summit from Milan, and of course, SoLongevity. And of course, my dear friend and colleague, Nick Palmerini, who I've been working with, as many of you will know. So I'll sort of set the scene, I think, for my talk. And it's been so interesting and so inspiring to hear about all the amazing work that's taking place around the world, and certainly in Europe. So I wear a few hats. I co-lead, and you can see on that slide, I co-lead the Quantum Healthy Longevity Innovation Mission with Nick Palmerini and Lynn Corner, and of course that's very linked to the City of Longevity program that we're here today to speak about. And these are major global efforts really to bring longevity to the masses, and in a trailblazing sort of effort, around the cities around the world. And most of my time is really spent working at the intersection of government, the investor community, the public sector, and of course, citizens, really to drive what I see as a fundamental thing that all of us here together are really addressing, is this fundamental need for system change to drive effectively what we have as a sick care model in so many parts of the world, and we really need to drive it to a preventative health paradigm. And that's where I see all the opportunities of all the science and technology here to really be part of that fundamental shift. So just a few reminders. We've heard over the past few days that has really kind of set the scene for a lot of my talk, and I know I don't have that much time, but I just wanted to mention just a few names. I mean, Andrea Meyer, she talked a few days ago, and talked a lot about, obviously, the hard end of science at the moment, but also it's really about creating those environments that nurture human flourishing, and indeed happiness has come out so many times. She mentioned it, and Francois, of course, has just mentioned it. And it's really about understanding the story of our lives, and really what inspires us really to kind of want to live for a long time. Luigi Ferrucci, who spoke a couple of days ago, and he's such an inspiration in the States, he reminded us that actually we still do not have any interventions that actually will sort of reverse aging in humans. And that despite all the research that we've been doing over the past 20 years, I mean, what comes out time and time again are a lot of things that actually we can do already. I mean, exercise, caloric restriction, there are all these sorts of things that already we can actually do that are having a huge impact on the aging process, and actually cut across and work across all the hallmarks of aging, which of course has come up many, many times. Nir yesterday talked about the myths, and the key message, I think, that came out, and of course Viviana had said this, is that we do actually need the evidence base, to convince us all to actually take all these wonderful interventions, and that will delay and prevent the chronic diseases of aging. And I think really what we really need, I think, to really drive progress, and is very much at the heart of a lot of what I do, is we need to look at new incentive structures and systems that actually will encourage and promote those healthier environments. And as Nick so powerfully communicated in with his wonderful panelists, the cities create a microcosm of opportunity really to do this. So I wanted to say that actually, we absolutely have the science and technology right now to do so much of this. So why aren't we doing it? And I think this is where we really do need to come together as a collaborative sort of scientific, but also many other stakeholders to come along. And we have to actually solve this great societal problem that we really do actually have, which is about poor health. I mean, it's literally dragging the economy down in the UK right now, and it's really focusing government attention. And actually, we have to also twin that with the factors, the realities of this aging demographic, which is happening everywhere. I mean, India is now preparing for it, and have actually got an amazing program underway to really look at how they can prevent the chronic disease of aging that will eventually hit their longevity dividend. So we launched the Quantum Healthy Longevity Mission a little over a year ago. You can see the Lancet paper there on the slide. There are many, many very esteemed scientists, Luigi, Nir, many people who have been at this conference today who've all been part of this, and of course Nick and many others. And actually, we've sort of realized that, there's amazing work, but we have to kind of go beyond, we have the hallmarks of aging, which has been a hotbed of focus of a lot of the research that we're seeing. But actually, we're kind of at a really interesting point that we know an awful lot, But actually, the more we find out, that what we don't know. And I think the human system is really, really complicated. And I think this is where we need to kind of take our thinking and actually our doing and our experimentation really into this new frontier of what, to really kind of unravel really what the mysteries of the aging process in the human system, which of course is a system within many other systems. And of course, we have the planet, and of course, many of you will know that at COP28, just 4 months ago, it was the first time that health was managed as part of the climate change agenda. And we know that the causes and the solutions of poor health are absolutely linked with the climate change agenda. The One Health model has been mentioned a few other times. We absolutely have to see it along those lines. But again, the cities of longevity, which has been talked about today, provide an opportunity about that. So this is, so we do know that aging is complicated and that actually humans, and this has come out over and over again, we are deeply affected by our environments. Isolation, loneliness, how do we achieve happiness, how do we achieve flourishing, human flourishing, is really the next frontier. And we have to remember that there is no single pill or molecule yet that will outdo the effects of poverty, stress, despair, bad air, that will automatically take 10 to 20 years off your life, as we've been hearing. So this is actually really where we need to go. So with my colleagues, with Nick Palmerini and many others, we sort of see everything in terms of the new frontier of the exposome. Many of you will have heard of the Human Genome Project. That was 20 years ago. I studied genetics, and I was very excited about this. But actually, the Human Genome Project told us, actually, genetics are only a small part, actually, of our determinants of our health. It's anywhere between 7 to 20%, depending on who you speak to. But actually, it's really the exposome that we really have to kind of get to grips with. And these are all the complex exposures that we're faced, every day in our lives. It's the food that we eat, and of course we know that the obesity crisis is being driven by junk food and ultra-high processed food. The air that we breathe is so important, the objects that we touch, the psychological stresses that we face, and the activities in which we engage. So of course, being active, movement, these have all come up so many times. And we also know, and this is what you often don't get in the animal model studies, is some people are much more resilient to stress than others. Now, why is that? Why can someone go to war and come back and be relatively unscathed, and then others suffer deep psychological stress? And these are all the sorts of things that we really need to understand, but also, how is it that other qualities like a sense of optimism, or indeed our need for hope, the placebo effect is very, very powerful, and that's all linked to the belief that we can do something, the hope that we want to be able to do something through our own empowerment. So this image there really speaks to how we need to see the aging process as part of the exposome, and that the loss of physical and also psychological resilience in aging really varies so much between individuals, but it also varies, as we're seeing through the study in the hallmarks of aging. It varies between cells, tissues, organ systems, and it's all that complexity that are really the new frontier that we have to understand, and of course how we also adapt to our environments. And we know human psychology and changing behavior is really tough. Getting your exercise and eating the way that we should, it's all a part of a massive behavioral change challenge, and it's really, really tough. And so we know we need to make it easy, cheap, we need to make it convenient. We need to kind of enter these principles in the same way that we have in other parts of our lives, like banking and shopping. And it has to be part of the daily fabric of our lives. So we really do need to get to grips with that. And again, it comes down to our environments. So I think the other point really is that psychological aging is something that has come up often and many times at this conference, and that I think has been underexplored. But even what we're saying through the science and the data that we have, we can see actually how important hope, optimism, despair, psychological stress, it actually has a bearing on our biology. So we really have to understand that, and we're just at the cusp of that. I think Harris Iyer is going to be speaking a lot about brain health and brain capital later this afternoon, which is great because it's such an important area. So I think what this really points to is this need to see the solutions that work not only on the biology of aging, but certainly on the psychology and the behavioral side of aging. Absolutely, and overall resilience. And I would say, indeed, how do we understand, how do we get to the point where we can have, indeed, happiness and human flourishing? So we have the tools, and I think this is the important part. We actually have the tools, and one of the ambitions that we have in terms of understanding in this sort of human exposome project, as we might want to call it, is, in the end, taking all this amazing research that's happening around the world. We have UK Biobank, we have China biobanks, we have many biobanks, we have many, many health research studies all around the world. In the UK, Our Future Health, they're recruiting 5 million healthy volunteers for one of the largest health studies in the world. We have all this access to data, and I know in the UK we're looking at a lot of very interesting digital and data reforms that will literally give control over people's data literally in the hands of the consumer with personal data wallets, and these are all the sort of legislative areas that we're looking at to make it easier to pull data from real people rather than it being in the domain and the control of big tech, as it has been the case so far. So we have a vision, working with my colleagues at the National Innovation Center for Aging, really to use those opportunities to understand aging biomarkers better, to create almost like an open federated test bed for health, connecting through global baseline standards, connecting up all the biobanks around the world. And we want to inform the next generation products and services. A longevity as a service, that will be and is already being developed by many longevity clinics, and of course SoLongevity is one of the pioneering ones. We want to be able to harness all those opportunities to really understand the data in terms of what will promote human flourishing. And I think how many minutes do I have, Nick? 2 or 3 more minutes? Yes. Yeah? Okay. So very, very quickly, I wanted to speak a little bit, because I know we're pressed for time. I wanted to speak about a particular project that is really about driving the scientific foundation behind this whole idea of how do we extend human health span resilience and flourishing. So this is a project, in fact, I think David Furman is here and speaking later today, but this had its origins a little over a year ago at the Foresight Institute in California. And I know and the Biomarkers of Aging Consortium in the US have been doing phenomenal work. They've got a few papers published just very, very recently on identifying and validating aging biomarkers for use in clinical trials. And what we wanted to do last year, and which has now been really kind of being extended into a wider sort of international momentum, is really what are the aging biomarkers that we have to identify but also validate to really understand the interventions, and there will be multiple interventions, both therapeutic but also in the wider exposomic space, that will extend health span, but human health span in terms of what matters most to human beings. And of course, happiness, joy, and all these things are very important to humans. Resilience, but also this human flourishing. So we're working with a number of scientists around the world. We're working with HealthSpan X Prize, which is a major challenge competition with $101 million that's been made available to really find those interventions that that will really drive extension in health span, particularly in the 65 to 80-year-old population, because I know there's a very, very big need there. So very focused on that. But essentially, we want to take this international collaboration methodology to harness the incredible science that is happening all around the world. Many, many scientists, and the X Prize will be a magnet for attention, but there'll be many other opportunities, with the research that's going around the world, other competitions and challenges, to really use that understanding and also encourage open, decentralized collaboration using digital, we've got the web, we've got sensors, we've got smartwatches. There's so much data opportunities to gather that data to really improve our understanding. And so we want to augment that with a huge international effort, which is very much around standardization and validating biomarkers through an open, decentralized collaboration approach. So these, and as we understand more about the impact of the exposome on human flourishing, these biomarkers at the moment need to go beyond the molecular, the physiological. They need to go into the digital. They need to go into the exposome. The phenotyping of the environment is all the sorts of things that we want to do. And of course, with the power of AI, with quantum, with systems biology, we have so much that is possible to be able to do this, to agree the guiding principles by which we can validate the use of aging clocks, for example, and so forth. And ultimately, we want to develop those hyper-personalized strategies that will really deliver on what we all want to see for our own health progress. So the purpose on that slide is what it says. And I think the one thing that I wanted to harness and perhaps highlight is that with the increase that we're seeing with, in terms of investment, but also with the number of wellness retreats and of course longevity clinics, we're at a very, very interesting, I think, point that we really do need to understand, but also be poised to respond to. We want to make sure that we have good science, and we don't want sort of that the cowboys sort of ruining the reputation of actually for many, many years that the longevity scientific community has spent, has worked very, very hard to build up that credibility and this sort of scientific sort of understanding. So we're at this point now where, and we hope that this project will kind of create the foundations and the excellence and that global exemplar that we need to set and make sure that we don't go back to the dark old days of snake oil, which could potentially bring disrepute and damage to the industry that we've worked very, very hard to protect and build. So these are some of the objectives, many of which I've mentioned, and I think one of the things just perhaps to pull out is we need to kind of really understand that dynamic resilience and capture and understand the causality of what is actually driving the hallmarks of aging, which again is not easy, and it's going to take a lot of scientific effort to come to understand. And of course, our stakeholders are everyone sitting here. I think it's been pointed out, I think Lars made that point. It's everyone sitting in this room, and of course, a lot of the work that I do, it's all about engaging, the politicians, the policymakers, the regulators, the investor community. We all have a role to play, and we have to work together around missions, to really drive progress. These are some of the key questions, and again, some of those are on the slide. You can read for yourself. How do we adapt preclinical animal models to best predict outcomes in humans? How can we use AI more effectively, and so forth? And this would just essentially summarizes our whole sort of approach, and there'll be a QR code at the end that you can, and all this will be is accessible on a GitHub and slide decks and so forth. So really, ultimately, we want this open methodology, involving the wider scientific community around the world, and includes people, groups like China. They've got an amazing work they're doing on biomarkers as well. Defining that international standard or consensus on the use of aging biomarkers and clocks, using validated biomarkers to accelerate and shorten clinical trial times, because of course that's one of the big challenges that we've had. Prevention takes a really long time in terms of measuring outcomes. Potentially biomarkers can shorten clinical trials. These are all the sorts of things that we're talking about with the UK government, for example. And I think this whole notion about decentralizing trials, it'll potentially accelerate and make the whole process much more agile. I was in Honduras and Vitalia, I think that was mentioned yesterday. They're all looking at ways to accelerate clinical trials and so forth. So I'll stop there because of time, but one final slide. The end goal is really to obtain and achieve sort of the validation that we need to see in the use of aging clocks and surrogate endpoints in trials, etc. And so I think, the last slide hasn't shown for some reason, but I will make sure that the QR code is made available for all those who would like to access the GitHub, so I'll make sure that that's sent round. But yes, so thank you for your attention. I think we're really excited about the opportunity of working with everyone here about bringing the science to the masses.
Tina. Thank you, Tina. Thank you so much for being with us.